Doctors and nurses of Reddit who have delivered babies to mothers who clearly cheated on their husbands. What was that like? Not a cheating story, but my sister's friend was born fair-skinned with red hair and green hazel eye colored. Both parents are dark-skinned with black hair and brown eyes. When her mom gave birth, everyone in the room went silent. However, the father knew that his wife didn't cheat. Turned out, his wife's great-great-grandmother had red hair and fair skin. However, hospital protocol made both parents get a DNA test, and everything was okay. I'm a nurse. I have seen quite a few situations where dad turns out not to be dad, but never because of the color of the newborn. I have, however, seen an absolute fuck ton of kids who are born and don't look like the same ethnicity as their parents for days or sometimes a couple of weeks. Babies often look darker when they are born. Just saying, some of these anecdotal stories might not necessarily be true. I was told this story by a nurse. Veracity might be clouded by time, but a birth of the couple's third child. The couple was white. The baby was obviously of Pacific Islander descent. Everyone went very quiet. The nurse telling me the story said she took a moment of silence as she realized what had happened. Then she tried to act normally, but waiting for the outburst. She said the tension was unreal. The guy stared for a minute at a child that was very obviously not his. The mum was already in tears and talking very fast. The guy stood up, looked around for a minute, then left the room. Never said a word. He wasn't seen again at the hospital. The mum spent the rest of the day on her phone. The nurse doesn't think she ever found him. The last part is even more distantly related gossip, but allegedly the father cut all ties immediately, speaking regarding care of his two actual kids only through his lawyer. If any of that is true, I take my hat off to the guy. Edit. Just to clarify, the story goes he was very much into raising/looking after his actual kids, but wanted nothing further to do with the mum or the kid that wasn't his. He lawyered up to avoid potential emotional fallout, which to me is pretty classy, again, if true. My brother married a half Korean, half white woman who had 3 girls to the same Mexican guy. The first girl looks Latina. The second girl looks Pacific Islander. The third girl has platinum blonde hair and icy blue eyes. They look nothing alike, and yet if you look at their lineage it all makes sense. I don't know if this ever caused any issues between her and her ex, but I could understand if an eyebrow was raised in the third one. Now she has a 4th girl with my brother, and she looks nothing like the other 3. Just standard brown hair, brown eyed white girl. I know this ain't super relevant to the question, but it always entertains me. A friend of mine tells the story of his aunt giving birth in the 1970s or 80s to a baby that at first glance appeared to be of Asian descent. Aunt and her husband are both Caucasian Midwesterners from long lines of the same sort, going back to Germany. There was evidently a shock moment, and then the aunt's father, my friend's grandfather, quipped, "Well, they say 1 in 7 babies is born Chinese," and everyone laughed. The tension broke long enough for the doctor, also a white Midwesterner of German stock, said that likely the kid's color is just off due to the events of the birth. That baby is now a man in his 30s or 40s and looks like your typical Midwesterner. He just had some tinge to his skin for a few hours following the birth, plus some dark hair at birth that has since lightened up. Newborn had chlamydia, got it from the mom, obviously. So the mom admits she was cheating on the dad, because there's no other way to explain that one. Except, the dad was cheating too, with the other guy's girlfriend, and all 4 of them had chlamydia, with no idea who had it first. They also had no idea who the actual dad was. That was a rodeo. When my baby was born, people asked me if her father was Polynesian. Nope. He's a skinny white man. There was no doubt he was the father. She was born with thick black hair. She was a big baby, 4 kilograms, and had jaundice which made her look very tan. The hair fell out, the jaundice went away, she thinned out, and I now have a strawberry blonde haired 2-year-old that looks exactly like her papa. But man, if I hadn't known he was the only man I'd slept with, I would have some serious doubts. Had a patient who came into ER for UTI with her boyfriend of 4 months. His words. She was 19. Acting extremely dramatic for just having UTI. We tell her we need urine. She urges us to cath her, which is really unusual, but she says she can't pee, so me and other nurse assume the position. to put in a catheter with her lying on the gurney. At this point nurse screams, "Call L&D. She's crowning." L&D nurse gets in just in time to grab the child as it shoots out into her hands and is a living breathing baby. The girl swears she had no idea she was pregnant. They wheel her off to postpartum and the guy is just kind of left standing there, dumbstruck. We only been dating 4 months. I had no idea she was pregnant. She never mentioned it at all, as he just buried his head in his knees while he was sitting on the floor against the hallway wall. I felt so bad for the guy. Anesthesiologist here. C-sections are typically done under spinal anesthesia, and we're the ones at the head of the table keeping the mother calm and talking her through the procedure while the surgeons operate. I've seen it more than once, but I remember one in particular when the parents were both very Caucasian and the baby was very much not. The actual father obviously had to be very dark-skinned. At delivery, when the not father saw the baby, he just looked down at his wife, who was starting to cry, and calmly said, "You freaking whore," and walked out. She started screaming for him to come back, but there wasn't much she could do since she was, still being operated on. She lost it to the point I eventually had to sedate her just a bit because she was in danger of injuring herself. As far as I know, her husband never came back to the hospital. I don't know what happened after that. My brother had a surprise baby this way. He and a co-worker had a one-night stand while she was broken up with her ex. She gets back with her ex, ends up pregnant. Flash forward to the delivery day. The day my brother sends me a picture of a random baby out of the blue and says, "I think I'm a dad." She is white. Her boyfriend is black. My brother is white. Baby came out looking very white. I don't know how it went down in the hospital room, but I know they separated very soon after. My brother went to visit her in the hospital and asked her if she would let him take a paternity test. She agreed and it came back positive a week later. And that's how I got my surprise nephew. Super awkward for everyone involved. The husband was only in the room for a bit then left and didn't see him again. The father of baby, showed up after the baby was born. I've also had where they didn't know whose baby it was, so both guys were present to see whose they thought it was. Not a doctor or nurse, but an undergrad. I had a buddy, Caucasian, who'd been dating the same girl, also Caucasian, for a while. She gets knocked up, he proposes. Fast forward a few months and both families are eagerly waiting at the hospital to meet the baby. The baby comes out black. Everyone is in shock. Girl is frantically trying to convince everyone that there's been a misunderstanding. My buddy called off the engagement immediately, returned the ring, and never looked back. Not a doctor, but someone in my extended family had a baby, 2 Middle Eastern parents that turned out to be dark-skinned. The father of the baby filed for divorce, even though the mother kept saying the baby was his. A few years later, they found out that the mother's great-grandmother was African, and that the baby obtained strong genes from her. They didn't get back together because too much had gone down at that point, but the mother was right all along. In high school, my gym teacher was married to the biology teacher, who was also really good friends with my math teacher. Always saw them chatting and walking together. Well, the biological teacher got pregnant, and when she brought the baby in, there was an unignorable resemblance to the math teacher. Her husband ended up driving to the nearest hospital and shooting himself dead in the parking lot. Was a big scandal at our relatively small private school. One of a few actually. Not exactly cheating, but definitely an awkward situation. During my OB rotation in med school, I was caring for a patient with a very large family, the kind that all wanted to be part of the delivery process from beginning to end. They were having a baby girl, and the room was absolutely filled from wall to wall with pink presents, bassinets, blankets, clothing, embroidered quilts, you name it. Anyways, I deliver the baby and I'm horrified, thinking there was some sort of mutation in the baby's vagina. After my initial shock, I realized it was simply a perfectly normal looking baby penis and testicles. The "congrats, it's a boy" was met with shock instead of excitement initially, but then everyone was so happy after understanding he was perfectly healthy. Apparently, even with good prenatal care, you can miss the male genitalia on ultrasounds about 1% of the time. Obligatory. Not a doctor/nurse, but both of my parents had blonde hair. When I was born, my hair was strawberry blonde. My paternal grandparents lost their ass and accused my mom of cheating because red tinted hair didn't run in their family. However, it ran in my mom's family with a red head popping up every now and then. My paternal grandparents didn't know that. They just really hated my mom, so looked for excuses to drag her down. It wasn't until I stopped looking like a potato, as most newborns do, and started looking like a person, when my dad's family features came through enough to make them apologize to my mom.